I recently had somebody ask me about making a mosaic tile sculpture, and they've never done it before. And they were hitting me up for some tips because they knew that I worked with concrete and I had some experience with tile. And I thought, "Oh, I don't know, what do I have?" And I actually ended up coming with a bunch of stuff. And I thought maybe I could share some of the stuff with you. Maybe it would help you. If you're doing tile work of any kind of mosaic or anything like that, there's probably some tips here I'm going to go over that are going to help you to have higher levels of success or success more often with the things that you're making, and the things that you're making should last longer. So what kind of stuff am I talking about here? I guess the first one, make your life easy on yourself. When you're choosing your mosaic tiles, try to choose stuff that's the same thickness. It's hard to do because there's so many awesome looking tiles out there and you want to get them all and break them all up and make some cool thing with it. When you have different thickness of tile, it's a real bummer to try to get them to all set, and you don't want to have a surface profile that's, like the surface of the moon. It would be nice with tile work if you could have a nice, smooth, flat top finish profile. And the way that you would get that would be choosing tiles that all start with the same thickness. It's a little bit limiting to work with, but you're going to make your life a lot easier with this process. So here's another tip. When you do mosaic tiles, typically you get 3, 5, 10, a dozen different kinds of tiles together to do this. They're going to be different compositions. Some are going to be porcelain or glass, maybe. Some are probably going to be ceramic, maybe clay, all kinds of different stuff going on here. Some of them are impervious to water completely. They absorb no water at all. Some of them are mostly water resistant. Some of them are not really water resistant at all and absorb water like a sponge. And that won't really serve you well in your mosaic tile work because you're going to have some which are going to be absorbing water too readily. And this becomes more and more important the larger of the thing that you're working on. Like if you're doing a mosaic tile, sculpture or some sort of mosaic tile work in a swimming pool, for example, boy, you want to be sure that you do it right because you're probably paying 10, 20, $30,000 for something fancy like that, and you don't want it to fail. So one of the things that I recommend to do is I take all of my tiles and I just throw them in a bucket of water and I just let them soak for a good long time. But I don't just take them out of the water and then just use them. I take them out, I don't know. When I start doing the towel work, they come out of the water. And I usually keep a towel on site or a couple of towels and I just toss them on there in a big stack. But as I'm getting ready to use them, they come off the stack and I dry them thoroughly. You can't have them dripping water, pooling water, as the terminology would be for SSD conditions, saturated surface dry. This is kind of like your gold standard for any concrete or mortar application, and tile setting falls under that. You want all of your materials to be fully saturated with water. You don't want any thirsty materials in there that are going to be stealing moisture out of your mixes, which is supposed to be hydrating the mortar or thinset products that you're using. So it's very important. Soak all of your tiles in advance because then you're going to be starting with SSD conditions, provided that you just make sure to thoroughly pat them dry before you actually try to apply any thinset to them. And since we're talking about that, let's talk about back buttering. I honestly thought this was more common knowledge for tile setting, but I guess it's not. So you have your surface, you apply your thinset to it, you want to put your tile on it. Do you have to put some on the tile or can it just go right on the surface? Or are you supposed to do both? Like, what's the deal here? So the terminology is back buttering. You're going to apply your thinset to the surface, and then you're going to remove half of the thinset with a notch trowel like this or like this. This is something you would use for small, delicate, detailed work. This is like large format tiles that you're installing in your kitchen floor, that kind of thing. You remove half of the thinset with the notch trowel, but don't just place your tiles. Like, I mean, if you did, it probably works pretty well. That thinset's pretty aggressive stuff and it bonds pretty readily, but it would work a lot better if you back butter your tile. So the goal of back buttering is not to apply extra thinset. We're not looking for an extra layer. We have all we need already. Where we've troweled out the thinset, we've removed half of it with a notch trowel. That's all we need. But what we don't really have is the mechanical bond where the thinset presses into the tile. Like when you take some on your trowel and you trowel it in, there's some mechanical force being applied. And after you trowel it on, you take the sharp edge of your trowel and you scrape all of it back off because you're not going to get all of it back off. Look at that surface profile there. But we have made sure that we have 100% contact coverage between our thin set and the tile itself. Now you can take that and you can lightly press or tamp that into the thin set bed with the notch grooves that you've made, and you're going to get a really sound connection when you do something like that. That back buttering is very, very important for all kinds of tile work. So here's another thing that people tend to do. You do a tile mosaic, it looks pretty good. That thin set sets up lightning fast, especially when it's thin layers and using small amounts, and especially if it's warm where you're working. So your inclination is, I mean, it's all hard to the touch. It feels pretty secure. Maybe I can just grout it right now. I'm pretty excited about doing this. Don't do that. It happens all the time. The thin set is hard and it's, strong, but it's not fully cured yet and has nowhere near its full strength that it's going to reach. So don't do it yet, because the mechanical process of applying that grout is probably going to dislodge a bunch of these tiles that you've put all this effort into making this, mosaic tiles sculpture or art with. So, fight that urge to apply the grout too early. I wait 24 hours at the bare minimum, sometimes 2 or 3 days even before I'll go ahead and grout it, just to give that thin set time to set up and do its thing. Since we're talking about attaching tiles, I want to talk about something else here, and this might apply to some of you, it might not apply to others. Are you making your own substrate for setting tile? Or are you just attaching tile to something that you bought or a finished product or something like that? That's different. But if you want to make your own substrate, we call it mud base. If you want to make your own mud base preparation for setting tile, it's definitely something you can do. It's basically just a simple mortar mix of 3 parts sand and 1 part Portland cement, 1/3 part hydrated lime, and usually a small amount of liquid acrylic, perhaps 10% by liquid volume. Replace 10% of the water in the mix with an acrylic or latex product. That's going to give you a great mud base preparation mix design. You put it on whatever you're doing, a wall of a swimming pool or a backsplash or a kitchen or floor, whatever you're doing. And this is the part where people, okay, so boom, we just dropped this. This is just some funny looking cement we've got here. We dropped it here. Oh, look. Okay, there we go. We got it all troweled up, right? So what do I need to do to this to get it to the point where I'm going to be able to put some tiles on it? There's a couple things to consider. I mean, one, ideally you'd like it to be flat, even level profile. That would be a big help. The thin set's very forgiving. There's a little bit of give in terms of, its movement, but ideally when you see fabulous looking tile installations, they looked fabulous before the tiles went on. When you do a mud-based preparation that looks amazing, the tiles have no choice but to look great. And especially if you're talking about anything larger, and especially anything with straight lines to it, because if you have something that's like a 40-foot long wall and it's straight and you have tiles on it, you can see from outer space if it isn't actually a straight wall, because the tiles just create this the visual draw where you can't help but notice that there's a bow where the tiles run even or something like that. So if you can, the more you can do to give yourself a flat, even, plumb, square profile to what you're going to apply these mosaic tiles to, it's going to help you out a lot. So let's talk about some ways that you can go about in doing that, because it's hard to do. I mean, you can trowel it, obviously, depending on what you're doing, but not everybody has the same level of skill with a trowel. So I'm going to give you a tip that's going to help you a whole bunch. This is called a sponge float. Maybe you've got one. Maybe you've never seen one before. These are a pretty useful thing. They're available at every hardware store. If you work with concrete, mortar, especially any kind of tile working, go ahead and pick one of these up. I'm going to go dunk this in my bucket of water, and we're going to get started. Definitely soaked, but I really kind of took most of that extra water out of it there, but nice and damp. So a sponge float, and by the way, a regular sponge works, especially if you've just got something small. But an advantage here is this is a trowel as well. So I am going to get some assistance. Like, if you just work a damp sponge in circles, it really helps to even out a lot of the inconsistencies that your lack of skill on a trowel might have left in the surface that you're preparing. Something like this is great because it works on a small scale or a large scale. It really helps to make up for some of the inexperience or lack of skill, because if you've ever seen people working a trowel, doing large work, tile work, driveways, things like that, the people who do it for a living make it look really easy. When you get that tool in your hand, it is suddenly not so easy. So with a damp sponge float and a circular motion like this, you're going to be able to get a couple of things here. For one, we've definitely helped to create, a flatter surface that the tile is going to sit more evenly on. It's not going to be rocking back and forth. We're going to get good contact and adhesion between the thin set, the tile, and the substrate itself. But there's also something else going on here. A lot of times when it comes to finishing concrete, you might be using something like a mag float or a steel trowel or something like that. And that would be a mistake if you're going to be setting tile on this surface. Even the mag float, which isn't a particularly smooth finish, but definitely not a steel float finish, it's so smooth that it really prevents a proper bond from the thin set layer. So here's what happens. Thin set's really forgiving. Heck, if you troweled it to your arm, it would probably bond to your arm. Warning, do not trowel thin set to your arm. Just an example. But I'm saying it really is fortified with many admixtures to make it super sticky. It bonds to stuff. So if I troweled this as smooth as I could make it, and then I put some tile on the next day with thin set, wouldn't you know, it's going to adhere very well, and you probably can't even pop those off of there. But it's not as good as it could be. You will be fooled by the fact that you will have success with your project and that the tiles will stick, everything worked. You gave it to your Aunt Wilma for her birthday and she absolutely loved it. But 3 years from now, you know what? Those tiles started falling off. And this is what you can do to help fix that. The sponge floater, as I said, even just a damp sponge itself, especially if we're not really worried about trying to smooth out any errors in the actual trowel or workmanship itself. If we're just trying to arrive at some sort of finished profile, which makes sense for attaching tile to, you would have far, far better adhesion to this one here than you would to this one. And all I would do at this point is I would let my substrate cure, dry. 3 days approximately is the minimum amount before I'm going to take the next step here. And all that next step would be to take something like a sharp edge and just scrape it down and take down any of the high stones which are just a little bit too high. And at this point here, if I apply a thin set to that, I use my notch trowel. I apply a back butter to the tiles, which have been soaking in water and that now been patted dry, so there's no pooling water on the surface. And I apply those on there. They are going to last forever, provided that you don't grout it the same day. And it's little tips like this that are going to give you more success. The things that you make are going to last longer. It's going to be more enjoyable for you. If everything you make ends up failing, you might give up at some point. And little tips, I hope, like this are going to make this better, give you more success. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe.